Hello, we are here today with Ryan Kirk, who does fantasy and sci-fi, if I'm not mistaken.
That is true, yeah.
Okay, fantastic. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're working on at the moment.
Yeah, my name is Ryan Kirk, and as you mentioned, most of what I do is fantasy. However, I have a wandering pen or typewriter, I guess, and can't help but dabble in sci-fi every once in a while. It's definitely one of my first loves.
Uh-huh.
At the moment, I am currently writing the third book in a new series, and am hoping to have it out the door by later this fall. So.
New
Um,
series.
yeah, it is called the Relentless series, and books 1 and 2 are currently out.
The
And
Relentless series. I like that.
yeah, and the third one, if it ever shapes up and behaves itself, will hopefully be out this fall.
Okay. That sounds fun. What's this series about?
Uh, it is about an empire where there are essentially two pillars of power, and one is your fairly typical medieval government,
Mm-hmm.
um, but they share power with the magic wielders,
Ah,
who are contained within a monastic system. And
ah.
so you've got monks and you've got armies, kind of as the two pillars of power.
Oh dear.
And, as one might imagine, power sharing just doesn't always
Doesn't
work out very well.
go well.
And so these three books detail the transition of power um, between the two pillars, and
Mm.
I won't spoil which direction it
And
goes.
something else.
um, but throughout the series, I've just been really fascinated by the idea of belief
Yeah.
and how belief in an ideal or belief in a system can both be a really powerful tool, but can also be really, really dangerous.
Oh yeah.
And so, trying to show both sides of that coin has been really, really fun to do over the course of the past couple of books.
Okay. So then do you have sort of a one main villain for the story, or is it just an exploration of the system?
Yeah, it is. The series is a little bit unique because um, I, as a reader, was starting to get really tired of open-ended first books in a series. Um, and
Yeah.
it is not necessarily anything against series. I think that a series can be done very, very well. I just encountered a few recently that were not.
Uh-huh.
And so it inspired me to write it more as a series of standalones.
Oh.
And so, although some characters definitely do recur
Hmm.
and can create a richer experience for somebody reading through the series, they are all separate standalone stories with different characters within.
How interesting. How did you manage that and still have I'm assuming it's linear chronologically speaking.
Yeah, it has basically just been really fun. Essentially what I've done is I have basically cherry picked points in history on this timeline and have just told stories of the events themselves and the characters who are uh, in them, and then jumping forward 10 to 20 years between
Mhm.
books. And then you kind of jump into a world that is the same but subtly different. It's been influenced by the events of previous books. And
Aha.
so if you are coming to the series new, you can read it and enjoy what is a fresh world.
Hmm.
And if you are actually reading them, 1, 2, 3, you can say like, oh, yeah, that's a little bit different than the first story, and
Hmm.
that has been an effect of these actions that have happened that are now legend for the characters who are in the current story.
How interesting. How did you plan that out, or did you plan that out, or is it just sort of you sneezed and the universe happened?
I sneezed and the universe happened. No, I'm a terrible plotter. It is not really what I do. I had a general idea of what I wanted
Hmm.
this arc to look like and where I wanted things to end up.
Hmm.
And So the first one, it was really just a true pantsing effort. I wrote a story that sounded really, really fun, and then turned on the imagination juices and
There you go.
imagined what life would look like, 10 years from that. What would be the effects of that action? And told another story from that perspective.
That sounds fun.
Yeah, it's been really, really fun. It's been typically I've only written series, and so it has been a really fun practice
To do.
to do this.
Interesting. Well, I'll have to have a look at that because I've not seen a series of standalones that function as a standalone series. That made sense in my head, but I'm not sure it actually made sense. Anyway.
I was inspired a little bit by, it's a series by Steven Erikson, the Malazan Book of the Fallen.
Yeah.
Where, at least for the first few books in the series, he does something pretty similar.
Okay.
Where the world is just so vast. He essentially has stories happening in different parts. And as you go deeper into the series, it is definitely required that you have probably read what has come before. But for the first 2 or 3, you could probably get through and read each one individually and not miss anything. So I was really inspired by that idea.
Yeah, well, interesting. I'm one of those people that has to read things in order and watch things in order, and it just, it's become a problem. So, so for your other series, I know you've got the Nightblade series that you did, which looks like it's based off of Japanese culture, if I'm not mistaken.
Inspired by, yeah.
Inspired by. Okay. And then you've got your AI technology series, which obviously has technology.
Yep,
so how much
dabbled
research...
in that sci-fi world.
Yep. I'm all for the sci-fi. So how much research do you do for these pieces?
It definitely varies. I definitely do more for my science fiction than I do for my fantasy.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, for the fantasy, it's definitely... I'm an avid traveler. I love going all over the place.
Yeah.
And so every time I'm visiting someplace, the notebook is always out and, capturing just ideas and sights and things that are different from my normal existence. And, that always kind of creeps its way into the fantasy stories. But beyond like studying martial arts, I don't think I do a lot of specific research for the fantasy stories. But for the artificial intelligence, I definitely ended up doing a lot of research and reading up an awful lot on artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
And it was really fun research. I am fascinated by it, and it was fantastic being able to buy books on artificial intelligence and call it a business expense.
Oh, AI. I mean, it's sort of somewhat taking over the world a bit, but not in the way that people think, is my understanding.
My general philosophy is that anybody who is trying to predict the future is probably trying to sell you something.
Well,
we have no idea where things will take us, and it'll probably be more absurd and more mundane than any of us think about when we think about the future.
That's true. I mean, I sort of hope to have flying cars by now, so...
The Jetsons has really spoiled us all.
Yeah, it's just ruined everything. Well, that and all of the sci-fi shows since then.
Do you ever go back and watch some of the old stories or old cartoons? Like the one I always think of is the 1984 animated Transformers movie, which, in case you're curious, takes place in the year, I think, 1999.
Oh, I love it.
And there's dude's got a flying hoverboard, and there's transforming vehicles and lasers,
and 99 came and went, and no hoverboard, and lasers were more toys for the cat.
And we were worried about our binary code crashing our computers when it flipped to 00 instead of 2000.
Oh no, millennial shift. All the banks are going to crash again. Oh yeah, technology is so much fun. That's why I love sci-fi. You get to explore things that could happen and have a they're feasible, but the actual likelihood of us seeing them anytime soon is a bit far-fetched, for which I'm grateful.
Absolutely.
I have seen some technologies that I never, ever want to see in real life show up in books.
Is there a technology that you are particularly worried about?
That's a tough one. I think it's more the use of technology by people, because people tend to be more problematic than the actual tech.
Technology is the tool.
Yeah. Wield it well, or not, as the case may be with most of the internet. So, as far as your writing process goes, what's the least favorite part? Because everyone has one.
That's actually a difficult question for me.
And this does include the publishing and after process as well, just in case.
The publishing and after might be my least favorite currently. What I've discovered as I've been doing this for a few years is that when I first started writing, the first draft was everything that I loved. And then editing was just a nightmare slog to have to get through. But as I've created more books and written more, I've found that not only do I love the first draft and the creation, that I also love going through the editing and cleaning things up and trying to make it more pretty, using the technical terms.
Yeah, I think that would be proper terms there.
And so I've definitely fallen in love with every stage of it more and more. The one that I definitely still do not love is everything that comes after you hit the publish button.
Yeah, that seems to be the tricky bit.
In a perfect world, you could just hit publish and you would never have to worry about it again. Money would rain from the sky and you'd be good to go.
I wish. That would be lovely. And unfortunately, I think that time has come and gone long before we were around.
I tend to think that you are right.
Yeah. Bummer. Oh well. So your editing process, is there anything you edit out of your stories?
A lot of the words.
You need those.
No. I'm actually one of those writers who tends to write a little too lean in my first drafts. And so when I'm editing, I typically actually increase my word count, which I think probably puts me in the minority of writers.
I do it too.
But my first drafts are really lean on description and all of the meat on the bones, if you will. And so editing is definitely a process of going back, seeing what I've missed, and adding in a lot of those sensory details that I haven't done before.
Right.
For the most part. I will say, I can confess, I have deleted an entire book on purpose before.
On purpose? Oh dear.
On purpose.
It must have really pissed you off.
It was more despair, actually, is where I was sitting.
Okay, abject despair is a good excuse too.
Yeah, no, I was writing, actually, it was my first series of books, the Nightblade series, and I had written the first one and had the first draft of the second written by the time the first one came out and was published. But then, before I published the second, I decided to write the third.
Oh dear.
And had this really cool idea and all of that. Then I went back to the second one and did the editing. And I realized when I was editing the second one that I really, really didn't like essentially a quarter of the book in the second one. And so I ended up deleting a lot, rewriting an awful lot, creating an entirely new ending for the second book.
And then you had to fix it.
But then the problem is that the second book ended in a completely different place. Like, it didn't even have all the same characters alive anymore. And so I remember that moment when I first opened the third book, and I looked at it, and I was looking at all the changes I would have to make in all of the chapters. And I was just sitting there, and I was looking at it, and I said to myself, it's going to be just much faster if I just rewrite this whole thing. And so I literally deleted an entire book.
Wow. Wow, that's a bit terrifying. I mean, I'm always afraid of deleting it by accident, but to do it on purpose. Whew.
Yeah, no, and I'm sure that the draft is still probably sitting around somewhere on a server, but yeah, I just decided it would be faster to get rid of it, and so I did. And I think I was probably right. I mean, time will never tell.
We will never know, although somewhere out there,
in an alternate universe,
someone has done this, and if we could ever compare the two, then, but that would not be productive. Well, I don't know. I mean, jumping to an alternate universe could be productive. Anyway,
it would certainly answer a lot of questions.
It would. Yeah, I have so many questions. Okay. So how many series do you have? I have lost count. You've got the Nightblade, you've got the newer one that you've got with your...
5.
5.
Yep, I've got Nightblade. I've got the prequel series to Nightblade, Blades of the Fallen.
Oh,
I missed that.
I thought that was together, so whoops.
Yeah, I mean, you could call it all together. They're all in the same world, but they're technically two separate trilogies.
Okay.
Then you've got Code, which is the artificial intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
Then you've got Primal, which was my sci-fi space exploration one.
Ah.
And then the new one, the Relentless series.
Yeah, okay. Space exploration is a bit different from your...
It sure was, yeah. I was... again, I get really curious, and then I just end up having to write something. And I had this really cool idea for a premise, which was, what if a group of explorers were out searching the universe and so far had not found anyone else, but then they discover an alien civilization, only to discover that that alien civilization is also human.
Awkward.
Yeah, right? So many questions.
Yeah. I can think of a bunch of different things that could go wrong with that.
Yeah, and human, but at a completely different level of technology. And so...
Oh dear. Oops.
It was really, really fun to play with.
Yeah, no kidding. That sounds very interesting. So, any plans to cross into other genres in the future?
No, 2 is probably one too many already.
Says who?
Says my bank account.
Well, yeah, okay, that one wins.
Yeah, no, and to be fair, I don't think I've ever really considered any others seriously. Different mediums perhaps would be really fun. Like, I think it'd be really fun to do a graphic novel.
Ooh, yeah.
But even if I did a graphic novel, it would definitely either be sci-fi or fantasy.
That could be fun. But would you do the art yourself or hire someone?
Until people are really eager for stick figure graphic novels, I think I would probably have to hire that out.
Yeah. I mean, you never know.
I'm always... I was going to say, XKCD always inspires me, because I'm like, well, if this guy can make a living, but XKCD is ridiculously awesome, and it would be a high standard to meet.
It is. And also there are some things in there that I don't understand that go right over my head.
Oh, absolutely. Did you by any chance ever check out his book, What If?
No, but I've been meaning to go and look for more of his stuff.
I would highly recommend it. During one of the road trips I was taking with my friends, actually through Ireland, we passed the time from like location to location reading chapters of What If. And I mean, it's just fascinating questions like, what would happen if everybody on the planet all congregated into one place, like shoulder to shoulder, and then if we all jumped up and down at the same time, would we be able to alter the Earth's orbit?
I don't know enough physics to be able to say yes or no, but my guess would be no.
Pretty sure the answer was no, but he explores all those questions and he like goes into the math, but then he will sometimes like extend them to the realm of the ridiculous. And it's absolutely fascinating and it's hilarious and you learn so much.
All right, I'm gonna go check that out because if anybody is entering the realm of the ridiculous, I want to know about it.
It's super cool. Yeah, it's like, can a submarine survive in space and just all these random questions that you would never think about.
Yeah, interesting. Huh. So as far as your travels go, where's your favorite place that you've been or would like to go?
Ooh, that is a great question. I think I've got a handful of favorites.
Okay.
Ireland is definitely one of my favorite places. Are you familiar with the Burren?
Yes.
We stayed in just this very out of the way, like 5-home village.
Oh, really?
Out in the Burren when we were there, and there was this little hostel there, and there was a pub like 150 feet up the road.
I think that covers everything.
And yeah, there were like 3 houses. I mean, just a lot of farming in the area, but it was actually next to like a disappearing lake where the rock was really, really porous. And so if it rained a lot, you would get this small little lake in the valley below the pub. But then the water would drain down and through. And I just remember sitting out there with my friends, drinking a beer, and it's obviously super quiet. Nobody's coming through. It's completely off of all beaten paths. And I definitely thought at that time, that is a place I could just sit down and never move from again.
Yeah.
It was super fun. I also really like Iceland, of all places.
Yes, Iceland is beautiful.
Iceland is gorgeous. The people are so nice. I just love how like rough the land is.
Yeah.
And I love cold weather too, so
then you're pretty much
fine. Yeah, I was there in June, and I don't think the weather ever got above like 55 degrees.
Yeah.
And I was just in heaven. I thought it was just perfect.
Yes.
The entire time I was there.
Yeah, Iceland is great, although the earthquakes could be problematic.
Yeah, just don't stand under anything. You'll be fine.
Okay, sure.
Avoid the volcanoos and the earthquakes.
You do realize that most of the island is volcano, right?
Yep, absolutely. Have you driven the Ring Road?
I've not driven it personally, but I was with someone who drove it for me, or I was there, and yeah. Anyways, driving in foreign countries, I'm not keen on, but
I remember driving past one of the bridges that had been destroyed by the floodwaters from a volcanic eruption in the glacier.
Yeah,
and it had just melted so much water, the water had rushed down and had just destroyed this bridge. And you look at these huge steel girders that just look like they've been twisted by a giant. And you're just like, yep, that's not something you want to get in the way of.
Nope, probably not. That would be, yeah.
But on the other hand, you've got like hot tubs and
the
heated swimming pools in every town.
Geothermal energy, which means that you can use as much hot water as you want.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. So,
and the food.
I loved Iceland.
Yeah. Iceland is...
And I do have a soft spot in my heart for Japan. I've been there a few times, and that is another country that I have always loved.
City or country, Japan?
Country.
Okay. Just curious, because they are rather different.
They are extremely different. And, I mean, the cities are fun. Like, I definitely love Kyoto and Tokyo, and I actually really like Hiroshima, too. But, no, my favorite parts of Japan are when you're able to get out of the city, and that's always fun.
A bit quieter.
Very much so.
Japan is on my list. I've only ever seen pictures, so...
Highly recommend.
One of these days, when I actually have enough money to do that.
Right.
Yeah, I'm still... The whole travel fund thing, being an author, they don't work out well together.
That is true. You've got all of the time. You've got all the freedom of time. It's
Yeah.
not freedom of funds.
Yes. Accurate statement. Oh, being an author. I mean, it's absolutely worth it. I would not say anything otherwise, but every once in a while.
Yep.
As far as
The siren call of the 9 to 5.
yeah, yeah. Every once in a while. So, as far as spending money goes, what's the best money you ever spent as an author?
Ooh, as an author.
I've gotten a few different responses. And this could be completely tangential to your stories.
Man, like I'll avoid talking about travel because I've already talked about that, and I really do think that's been valuable for storytelling. But honestly, some of the best funds that I've ever spent have been to go to writers' conferences.
Oh, really? Where's the best one?
Well, I don't know where the best one is, but I am a big fan of 20 Books to 50K down in Vegas. I am hoping to go to Worldcon in New Zealand next year.
Ooh, that would be so cool.
That would be so much fun. But the one that I have done the past couple of years is the Smarter Artist Summit down in Texas.
Yeah.
And like content of the conference aside, I think that what is absolutely so useful is being in a room with other people who are also working their butts off to make a living. And I mean, being a writer is definitely a fairly lonely career for the most part. And I feel like it's very easy online to find communities of people who are very interested in being writers, but actually being around people who not only like are interested in being writers, but are willing to spend the time and money to do something like a conference.
Yeah.
I just think that's really, really useful, and it has inspired me. It's definitely taught me how to be a better business person. It's definitely helped me make connections and friendships with other writers. And all of those things have been super, super powerful and have made my writing, my business, and my life way better.
Good to know. I have not been to any writing conferences yet, but then I'm still new at this, so.
Highly recommended.
Good to know. All right. Although, when is the one in Texas? Because if it's in the summer, I might just say,
It is in February, usually, I believe.
Much better. Much better. Yeah, no. The heat is usually a deciding factor on all of these things.
I'm totally with you.
Productivity goes up in the fall. Hooray!
Absolutely. Yep. I love my northern climates.
So is there a story out there that you wish you had written? And you're welcome to steal someone else's work for this. Or you can come up with
how many of them? Man, every time I read a fantasy novel that I'm like, oh man, okay, I've got a fantastic one, and it is Jade City by Fonda Lee.
Jade City. I don't know that one, actually. I mean, it sounds familiar, but I haven't read it.
Yeah, I think it won the World Fantasy Award a year or two ago. But
That's
it is a like inspired by Hong Kong kung fu films.
Oh, really?
Gangster films.
Oh.
And just a deep, deep fantasy. And it's one of the most unique combinations I've ever seen.
Yeah.
It is done beautifully well, and it hits like all of the buttons of things that I love.
Yeah.
It provides like this magical backdrop for like all your favorite kung fu flicks.
Yes.
It is deep world building. It also has this fascinating gangster element to it. And so you've got all right, like the duty and honor and family.
Yeah.
I wish I could remember the tagline, but it's so good. But yeah, it is an absolutely fantastic story. Tremendously well done. The second book in the series just came out this week, and I just started it. And
okay.
I wish I would have thought of martial arts, gangsters, fantasy before she had, because that is
that is a
amazing.
fascinating combination, and not one that I would have easily put together.
You wouldn't think about it, but it's like, I hesitate to call it urban fantasy because I don't think it is. I don't think it fits the tropes. But
Mm-hmm.
at the same time, you've got, the gangsters are driving their cars around and watching TV, and people still use guns and weapons.
Uh-huh.
But you also have this crazy fun magic system, and it all works together so beautifully. And you've
Huh.
got just this internal family and all these relationships that are so exquisitely written that, yeah, I cannot recommend Jade City enough. It is absolutely amazing.
Okay, I will go have a look at that because I had heard of it. Yeah, now that I think about it, I have heard of it, but I haven't read it, and that is the important bit right there.
It's so good.
Okay, um, sort of moving on to the writing world in general, are there any traps that you think people should avoid who are trying to get into this world?
Mm. This one is going to be maybe an unpopular bit of advice.
Okay, go for it.
But I think there's a lot of people out there who talk about trying to write to market and
Ah,
trying to write something that will sell.
yeah,
And I think, as with most things in life, it's not an either or question. It's not like you're not choosing art or commercialism.
sure.
I think that it's definitely a spectrum
Mm-hmm.
where you are maybe on one end there's something that's just so artsy and so out there that only maybe like two people in the world will ever understand it or want to read it. And on the other hand, you've got, I don't know, the Avengers, the most commercial thing in the world, whatever that ends up being. And most people fall somewhere in that middle.
Mhm.
But I think that oftentimes people place a lot more emphasis on, will this story sell?
Mhm.
And coming at it by asking that question first, rather than writing the story that they want to write first,
Yeah.
and then figuring out how to sell it.
Yeah.
Um,
I
I
would
think,
probably agree with that. I think if you write for a market, write for a marketing situation, then you're not going to necessarily perhaps enjoy it as much. And I think if the writer doesn't necessarily enjoy what they're writing as much, then the readers probably won't either.
yeah, and I'm sure that if you ask any of the people who are, proponents of the right to market,
Hmm.
they'll talk about, finding that sweet spot between what you love
Right.
and what will sell. And I think that that's fine. I think that more people would benefit by focusing first on what's the story they want to tell and what's the story they want to write,
Hmm.
and then figuring out how to market it and where to sell it,
Yeah.
instead of starting that first. And maybe it makes that journey to independent authorhood a little bit longer, but I think that it creates better stories in the long run.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I would say that's probably pretty good advice. Write what you like. Although, honestly, if you're trying to be a writer, then there has to be some amount of passion there. Otherwise, why?
Hmm. I
Because
mean,
this
I've
is
I mean,
not a job you choose easily.
I've definitely talked to people who have really fallen into that trap where they've been like, well, I started writing this and the market was really hungry for it, and now they feel like they're really trapped in it and they don't want to write it anymore. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, I think that always that first priority is, what is the story that you want to write?
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, that is fantastic advice, and thank you.
Yeah,
So,
you're welcome.
is there anything else you'd like to add that may or may not be writing related at all?
Um, I think uh, the big kick that I've been on lately is just telling people to pay more attention to stories in their lives.
Yeah.
Um, and obviously I'm an author and I love books. I don't even have Netflix, so like,
Good for
you
you.
know, obviously I'm going to say read more books, but it doesn't have to be books. It could be TV shows, it could
Sure.
be movies. I mean, there's even musicians that are creating albums that are stories these
Yeah.
days. And I think that any avenue of story is a fantastic avenue.
Mhm.
You know, finding what works for you. We're definitely in the golden age of being able to experience more stories than
Yes.
ever dreamed possible. But just telling people to pay more attention to them. They are really powerful, and they shape the way we look at the world. And I think
Yeah.
that, yeah, and be selective. Like, choose the best stories and the ones that you want the
Mhm.
most.
Mhm. I
And
would.
don't be ashamed of whatever they are.
Yep. There is no shame in any of that. Well, yeah, no, definitely good advice. There are so many stories out there, and with the age of the internet, so many people can create stories and share them with the world, and you can find them. And I think we almost get drowned by it and don't notice it anymore. So,
Hmm.
sound advice. Alrighty, well, thank you for so much for coming on and talking with me. This was good fun, and I learned
Oh.
all sorts of things about Iceland that
Oh, such a great country. Such a
it
great country.
is. Oh, it's so beautiful. Although I do wish their trees were just ever so slightly taller because it's a bit disconcerting to be taller than the trees.
That is fair. That is fair.
So that's my only critique for Iceland is just
Grow the trees a little bit higher.
yep. Although I'm not sure they can. Well, thank you for doing this.